What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So, it's been a few weeks. I took a little time off because I got married, and me and my wife went to Furnace Fest. It was the last year they had Furnace Fest. So, that's where I've been. That's what I've been doing. So, kind of took a little break from any videos or anything like that. But, I'm back, and I have a topic that I want to hit on today because I've been seeing a bunch of comments on posts about this. Well, Epiphone came out with a new guitar, and I've been seeing a bunch of posts. It's not specifically about the guitar they came out with, kind of more just a in general thing. But I've been seeing a bunch of comments on it, and you know, just as the internet is, the comments are spicy, maybe a little misinformed. Maybe they have a valid point as well in some cases. So, we'll talk about it. Epiphone has a new guitar out. It's the Matsumoto 1955 Les Paul Standard. And it is, it's one of these new inspired by ranges, right? So, it's got Gibson pickups in it. And it's got the open book headstock and all that stuff, right? And it's a cool guitar. And I like it so far from what I can tell. I mean, I haven't played one or anything like that, but it looks cool. It's like a converted 55 gold top. So it's got like the wraparound bridge. And I'll have a picture of it like as the thumbnail, right? So you guys can see it. But it's got like the wraparound bridge, but it's got humbuckers in it instead of P90s. It's kind of a neat guitar. It's based off of a vintage 55 gold top that he plays a lot. If you know who Matsumoto is. Anyway, like I said, not really about him, not really about his guitar, but all the comments I was seeing on the post about the guitar was the guitar costs $1,500, which is kind of run of the mill for these like inspired by like signature guitars, right? And so all the comments I've been seeing are, why does this guitar cost $1,500 and it has an Indian Laurel fretboard instead of rosewood, right? So if you don't know, a few years ago, probably longer than a few years ago at this point, rosewood was kind of, on that list of like, not really endangered, but kind of getting there. And so, it was starting to be regulated and stuff like that. And a lot of your big guitar companies like Epiphone and Fender and, whoever else, right? They had kind of swapped over to this other wood called Indian Laurel. I think now you kind of just see it called a Laurel, right? And it is a rosewood-ish derivative, right? And the issue most people have with Laurel. Now, I have seen some comments, people saying, like, it feels like sandpaper, it feels terrible, and I don't really agree with that. I've played some guitars that have Laurel fretboards, and it is a little coarse, it is a little more porous than rosewood is. But to be honest, I'm not even really like a giant fan of rosewood. I mean, I play customs mostly, and they have ebony fretboards. And I just prefer ebony fretboards because of those reasons. Like, ebony's real dense. It's not porous. You can't really feel the wood grain in it at all. Rosewood, you can kind of feel the wood grain some. But Laurel, some people say you can feel it a lot more than even on rosewood. It's kind of sandpapery feeling. I don't know if I take it that far, but the biggest complaint I see from people about Laurel is the way it looks. It tends to be a very light colored wood. Rosewood can be very dark. Like, take my Deluxe, for example, right? Like, this is rosewood, but it is very dark rosewood. Very dark rosewood. And all of the Laurel fretboards I've seen, they kind of vary. There's dark ones that look more like rosewood. A lot of people wind up staining them. But they can be very light in color. And sometimes they can almost have like this pinkish tint to it as well. And a lot of people don't like that. Just is what it is. It's an aesthetic thing, but a lot of people don't like it. So, why is Epiphone still making these guitars with Indian Laurel fretboards when some of the regulations in the past year or two have been lifted on rosewood, right? Fender, at one point, wasn't making any import guitars with Laurel. They were only using, with rosewood. They weren't making, they weren't making any import guitars with rosewood. It was all Laurel. They were only using rosewood on American stuff. Epiphone switched over to all Laurel, no rosewood. Gibson was still using rosewood, but they had raised the prices of their guitars and stuff like that, right? So now that rosewood has become easier to get again, Fender has gone back to using rosewood on like their Mexican series guitars. I think the Squires are still using Laurel, but all the Mexican-made Fenders are back to using rosewood. So why is Epiphone using Laurel on high-end guitar, on $1,500 guitars, right, when they can get rosewood again? And the main answer is kind of boring, and it's not really something I think people really think about or, like, even want to consider, because it's so mundane and boring. And this is just me kind of hypothesizing, but being in the guitar industry and the musical instrument industry in general, we buy a lot of stuff, and you don't want to lose money on the stuff you've invested in. So my guess is they probably just bought a ton of it, and they still have it, and they want to use it all, so they don't lose money on it. That's just what it is. They thought they weren't going to be able to get rosewood, and it was going to be really expensive. They found a cheaper alternative, and they bought a ton of it, and they still have it. That's really all there is to it. Like I said, that's kind of a hypothesis on my part, but it's based in knowledge of the industry. We stock up on things. We don't buy, one pallet of something, right? We buy truckloads of stuff. Truckloads of certain types of instruments and cases and raw wood, strings and materials, right? Like, the company I work for, we buy that stuff by the truckloads. And so if they have warehouses full of Laurel, they're not just going to throw it all out because they can get rosewood now. They're going to keep using it until they get low on it, and then they might start using rosewood again. Like I said, not a very artistic answer, not a very exciting answer. It's just business and money. They spend a lot of money on that stuff. They got a ton of it, and they want to use it up. That would be my guess. So that's probably why they're still using Laurel on all their Epiphone guitars. Personally, I do agree with a lot of what these people are saying. I think they should save the Laurel and use it for cheaper stuff, and then on these signature guitars and these inspired by Gibson guitars with the fancy headstocks and the real mother of pearl inlays and the Gibson electronics and the nice lifting style cases and all that stuff, they should offer rosewood on those guitars. That's my personal opinion. That's what I think. There might be some other business and monetary factors as to why they aren't doing that yet. They might just not have access to the stuff. They might have just bought so much of the stuff. You got to remember, Epiphone's a huge company. We're not talking about, like, some small company here, right? Like, Epiphone's massive. They have their entire own dedicated factory in China that only builds Epiphone guitars. So they probably bought a metric ton of this stuff. And they just don't want to lose any money on it. But I do think that if they're going to keep doing these inspired by Gibson guitars and these higher-end Epiphones, if they're going to keep pushing the price point and try to compete with guitars like LTDs and Schecters, right? Like, people don't have a problem spending a lot of money on import guitars. They don't. But the features have to be there in order to justify it. And I don't think people are going to continue to be happy. You know what I mean? Like when rosewood wasn't an option, people were just kind of like, it is what it is. You know, they're not going to use rosewood. They can't get it. It's too expensive. They're only going to save it for Gibsons and high-end Fenders and ESPs and stuff like that, right? On their import guitars, they're going to use this cheaper alternative. I think people just kind of accepted it then. But now that that isn't the case anymore, and these companies can get rosewood again, I think people are going to start pushing for that because they want it more. And I think if Epiphone wants to keep doing these high-end guitars and these expensive imports, that they have to listen to what their customer base wants, and what their customer base wants is historically accurate spec guitars, right? That's kind of the whole selling point of these like 59 Epiphones and these, inspired by custom shop, hollow bodies and stuff that they're doing, right? They're putting Gibson custom buckers in them, and doing the open book Gibson headstock, and they're doing real mother of pearl inlays and long neck tenons on the neck joints, right? The whole thing, like, that's kind of Gibson's main customer base is historically accurate reproductions of things. That's what people like. They like 50 spec, golden era style guitars. That's what people want from Gibson. And that's what people want from Epiphone if they're going to pay $1,500 plus for a guitar that says Epiphone on it. They want it to be as historically spec as it can. And to not have rosewood on those guitars when you have access to it, I think is really going to hurt them. So, that's the video. That's my opinion and my take on that. What do you think? Do you have an Epiphone? Do you have any guitar, I guess? You get a Squire or a Fender or something that has a Laurel fretboard on it. What do you think about it? I don't have a ton of experience with Laurel. Like I said, I've only played a couple of Epiphones here and there. When I go down the Fender rabbit hole and buy a Fender guitar, I tend to lean more toward maple neck Fenders anyway, so I haven't had any real experience with the Laurel. So I do have the Squire Jazzmaster in here that has a Laurel fretboard on it, and I haven't played it a whole lot, but as you can see, and I need to get back to I need to finish this up, but you can see the fretboard is kind of, it doesn't look like that rosewood on my Les Paul at all. It's much lighter in color, and it does have kind of a dry feel to it, and I have like really conditioned this fretboard too, and it feels a lot better than it did, but it doesn't feel like rosewood. I'll give them that. It does not feel like rosewood. So, on a guitar at that price point, it doesn't bother me. But on a $1,500 guitar that is kind of being sold to me and marketed as this 55 or 59 reissue type deal, historical spec, all that stuff, right? I think it's kind of a thing. I think people have a legitimate gripe about it. But I think a lot of that gripe is coming from somewhat of an uninformed place. They don't really understand why, I understand the why. I said I have my theory about it, and it's probably accurate. But even still, I think if Epiphone really wanted to, they could go out and get rosewood and start putting rosewood on these more expensive guitars, and they could continue to use the Laurel for their standard line guitars and their more beginner line stuff. That's what I think they should do, but again, I don't know all the inner workings of their financials and stuff and like exactly what they have access to, right? So there are some, unknown factors there in play that I don't really know the inner workings of. So just kind of keep that in mind, At the end of the day, like, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. But if you really don't like the Laurel for whatever reason, here's the thing. You're already buying an Epiphone, and it isn't going to be historically spec'd. Even even when they bill it as being a historically spec guitar, right? The measurements are different because they use metric measurements. The plastic they make the pickup rings and the pick guards and stuff out of is different. You know, the finishes are not nitrocellulose, they're polyurethane. So, you know, there's already a lot of stuff that isn't going to be historically accurate when you're buying one of these guitars. And I think, even though I do agree with the sentiment about the Laurel versus the Rosewood on these guitars, I think getting hung up on it is, I don't want to say stupid or silly or anything like that, but I think it's kind of an overblown issue, right? Like, you're getting hung up about the historical accuracy of the specification when there's other things that are never going to be historically accurate about an Epiphone versus a Gibson, even though they're billing it that way and marketing it that way, right? So, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. My advice is really just, if you can get your hands on one, play it, make sure you like it before you buy it. Or if you do buy it online, buy it from somewhere that has a return policy, you know, so that you can sit with it for a couple of weeks and decide if you like it or not. And if you don't, you can send it back, you know, no harm, no foul, whatever. So, that's my advice. At the end of the day, I don't think it's a huge issue. If it really matters that much to you about the historical accuracy, then, like, don't buy an Epiphone. Buy Gibson, you know. It'll have a nitrocellulose finish, and it'll have much closer specs, you know, or even go buy a custom shop or something like that and just actually get the real specs you're looking for. And, like, I know, well, those guitars cost 10 times as much as an Epiphone does. Yeah, they do. But, you know, I mean, compromise, man. You know, you're paying a tenth of the price. You're not going to get everything exactly at the historically accurate specifications that you want, right? And if you do want that, then you're going to have to pay a lot more money. So, that just kind of is what it is. You know, you can like it, you can not like it, but it is what it is. So, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have, you know, more experience with a Laurel. If you like it, if you prefer it, which I haven't seen anyone say they prefer it. So, you know, if you do, let me know, because I would be interested to know why you like it. I know a lot of reasons why people don't like it, so it would be neat to hear why someone does like it, right? So, hope you guys liked the video, and I will be back next week.